Explained by the Billy Meier contacts, mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more, compiled by David Chance, revised July 2, 2025.
Future Earth Humans Part 1. See also Gilgamesh. See also Hyperborea, Hyperboreans. See also Ica Stones. See also Longskulls. See also Men in Black. See also Nazca Lines. See also Nokodemion. See also Ptah. See also Quetzalcoatl. See also Rods. See also Starchild Skulls. See also Teos Caves Metal Library. See also Tunguska Event 1908. See also UFOs Flying Saucers.
Asket %27s_acquaintanceship.
Asket's clothing also seemed strangely familiar to me, and it was completely different from Sfath's somewhat cumbersome clothing, which was reminiscent of a diving suit. The way Asket was dressed had to nearly awaken the impression of a very modern angel. She wore a floor-length, very heavily pleated dress, of a peculiarly whitish-silver color, belted at the hip. Long brunette hair fell over her shoulders and her face was very beautiful. At least, I perceived it so. We sat gently down on the ground only a few meters from the gigantic construction, and only a few meters from a small Bedouin camp where various humans, dressed like Arabs, were already busy with the breaking of their camp at this early morning hour. They took no notice at all of the landing of the ship, and naturally, I was astounded because of that. It seemed simply absurd to me that the people could not see us. Yet I then accustomed myself very quickly to that and found it very interesting that our invisibility really let nothing be recognized. Asket had, until then, not spoken another word, yet now suddenly her voice sounded in me, and then I felt her arm. I was not able to see her, because everything was indeed still invisible, as were Asket and I. But now she explained to me that she was attaching a small device to my belt, so we would also continue to remain invisible after we left the ship. I felt how she busied herself with my belt, and quite suddenly, I saw Asket kneeling next to me. Shocked, I spun around and stared across at the Bedouins, because now they would indeed have to see us. But then I heard Asket's voice in me again, which explained that only we could see each other, while we were invisible to all other eyes. We left the ship, which I could likewise now see, and which stood so majestically next to the Sphinx, and, according to Asket's statements, could be seen by nobody. That must indeed have simply been a mistake of hers, because I still was not able to comprehend that, because of the small device hanging on my belt, everything was actually only visible just for the two of us.
Asket's explanations Part_1 Road.
The reason for our coming into this, your darn universe, lies in earlier times that are calculated in several centuries, and indeed, in the urge to explore, and in a fulfillment of an obligation of our race, who, from the earliest times, came from your darn universe. Since then, we again explored the expanses of your universe, and, several centuries ago, discovered this solar system and, therewith, this world, whose inhabitants show a very old connection with the Pleiadians, as you name them for certain reasons, and in which we also are involved, also in the form of that which pertains to a mission. To be precise, the centuries, by your time reckoning, line up together to 33, during which we were again able to travel and explore your universe. Through our incessant explorations, we again found this world, as well as also our original homeland, and the very distant descendants of those who, from the earliest time, were the responsible ones who were relevant to the human life of this world, because a portion of the humans of the earth were not born here. Many are descendants of those who came out of the expanse of outer space, and indeed from that space that you name Lyra and Vega, with the Eye of God, the Ring Nebula. In those territories lie, namely, the real and ultimate original homeland of the later terrestrial human races. Certainly, today, The actual direct descendants of the terrestrial forefathers no longer populate the territory and spaces and systems around the Ring Nebula and the Vega and Lyra heavenly bodies in a space-time shifted configuration. Rather, they live today on space and time shifted world bodies, far on the other side of the system that you name the 7 heavenly bodies, 7 sisters. Respectively, the Pleiades, approximately 400 light-years distant. They are the distant descendants of your Earth humans and our actual original forefathers. Yet, in something less than 20 Earth years, calculated from today, you should be given clarification about all these things from the direct descendants of your forefathers themselves when you are sufficiently matured to cope with the new explanations and knowledge. Less than 1,130 Earth years ago, 3 races capable of space travel from far galaxies of this universe dispatched their expedition ships and advanced to the Earth. They explored this world with small scout craft and also made contact with priestly Earth humans, secretly and unrecognized, in order not to spread terror and angst. They heard and learned from the Earth humans the insanity of their ideologies and religions, and suddenly they believed themselves to be disadvantaged and falsely led in their own philosophy of creation and in their own evolution of consciousness and spirit. As a life form still very spiritually underdeveloped and underdeveloped in consciousness, the Earth humans were able to throw these foreign life forms into doubt and to sow discord among them. Yet, was that any wonder then? If it is considered that very highly developed life forms from foreign galaxies visit the Earth, and here suddenly are instructed that they, as a race which has developed very far, are to have been disadvantaged by creation, because, allegedly, creation personally made itself known to a still very underdeveloped race, and they themselves, as a much higher life form, were passed over. Where was the blame to be found here? That creation created its only begotten Son, and transferred him to Earth, to a poor, underdeveloped people, and did not create this only begotten Son for the much higher developed life forms? Thus this insane information was spread on 3 distant worlds, and announced to the races, which had, for thousands of years, lived in peace, love, and in complete harmony among themselves, and with all forms of life. The insanity of the terrestrial religions was taken up by scientists, and further expeditions were sent to Earth in order to work for years to investigate all required religious facts. After the return of these expeditions, it was concluded, after exact clarifications, that all peoples would be instructed according to the terrestrial Christian religion, and indeed in all matters. This was a fatal error, because within only 11 years, this peaceful humankind from a distant planet, having previously lived only by the creational laws, changed itself into the faith-based Christian image of the Earth human. At first, fights and discord originated only in the narrowest circles. Then, however, everything expanded very quickly, and it came to public unrest. Already the life forms soon murdered each other, until everything degenerated into a malicious worldwide war. Finally, encroachments into the 2 other worlds resulted, one of which was then destroyed. Different spacefaring races became attentive to that, and finally intervened, and forcefully terminated the deadly discord, which had already slowly carried itself into the entire solar system. The terrestrial religions, brought there through the expeditions, and the destruction releasing Christianity, were strictly forbidden to any life forms. All existing religious material was destroyed, and the old way of life again became the highest law. Any advance, and any further visit to the Earth was forbidden, and a decree was even issued that, if, unexpectedly, a ship should stray onto Earth, and no further possibilities of progress could be found, the entire crew, together with their ship, must totally eliminate itself. The Earth human has become capable of destroying his world in an atomic explosion, which would bring very dangerous consequences for the entire system. The entire inner solar system could be destroyed through an atomic destruction of this Earth, and fragments of it, or the planets, could be driven out into space as very dangerous projectiles. Thereby, again, entire further planetary systems could be destroyed and disrupted, which could lead to an unprecedented catastrophe in the SOL system. Through a destruction of the Earth, and so forth, the structure of space-time could not be torn, but the entire solar system could fall into a deadly ruin. In and of itself, this danger is really not small, because, as the Earth finds itself in a very exposed spot, this gruesome event could actually become reality if the destructive power is great enough, and is of atomic origin. Therefore, it is our main task to prevent this possible event through clarifying impulses, and also to supervise, together with other forms of life from other worlds in this Earth's universe, so that the already evoked mischief of the Earth scientists is contained and averted through unnoticeable influencing impulses. That is a part of our mission, the most difficult that was ever to be recorded in the history of this solar system. We are caused to intervene, using logically enforced nonviolence, in the machinations of politics and religions, and to teach and positively influence leading personalities without them being conscious of it, and to flatten, in a positive manner, their intrigues and politics, and so forth. Yet also thereby, it would be unfortunately unavoidable that various leading powers of various countries of the Earth would be annihilated, deposed, or even murdered by their subordinate organizations or adversaries. The list of the politically leading men who would be killed through the hand of murder would be very long in the coming time, yet we may not change that. It is not our fault that all that would come out that way, because the Earth human alone bears that guilt. We want no death and no murder. We want peace in this and all other universes. Unfortunately, this requires that we must influence leading powers of the Earth to peace, using impulses, whereby, however, they would create deadly enemies, whereby, unfortunately, many good humans will die, which we really cannot, however, prevent. Unfortunately, we only have time until autumn of the year 1974 to prevent the destruction of the Earth. Subsequently, our time is very tightly measured. Were our mission to fail, then this system-wide catastrophe will probably occur. But we have very good outlooks for the success of our mission, which is why we have prepared you, Billy, for our target day since your birth. If we have fulfilled our mission to prevent the gruesome catastrophe, then your mission comes about shortly after that, in the year 1975, about which you will be yet further prepared until then. Consider with these things that we have not come to interfere in the religious and political matters of Earth, or to lead the Earth humans in these things. We have also not come in order to establish contact with Earth humanity and to greatly help them in their evolution. We are only here in order to fulfill our mission and the prevention of the catastrophe, and to prepare you for your difficult assignment as prophet. For further things, like help with evolution, and so forth, other forms of life from your own universe are responsible, who will initially call themselves Pleiadians. Already for millennia, they supervise the Earth and keep those spacefaring races in check who wish evil for you Earth humans and want to gain control over Earth humanity with the employment of religion and all the related deceptions, hallucinations, and trickery with which they buoy up the Earth humans with false promises.
Asket's explanations part _2.
Asket's explanations and remarks took a very long time, and many things were also mentioned and explained afterwards, about which I must continue to maintain strictest silence. Even if I wanted to change this, I could not do so, because firstly, I made a promise, and secondly, everything was secured by a security block, so I would not be able to talk about it, even willingly. I do not know the nature of the security block, and it is only known to me that I would not be able to speak if I wanted to do so without permission. I also know this much about it, that the security block, which Asket has created through a device that seems a little strange to me, is connected with my sense of duty and other things in my consciousness. That is all I really know about it. It was already broad daylight when I woke up again and saw that Asket had conjured up drinkable and edible things from somewhere. We sat down comfortably at a table-like structure that had been pulled out of a ship's wall and feasted on a hearty breakfast. What I ate and drank I could not define, but it was very good, even if everything was completely foreign to me. The potion was slightly yellowish-white and a little thick and was probably some kind of juice from a fruit I did not know. The food also seemed to be made of fruits, and also of some kind of vegetables. The taste of everything was very foreign to me, even though everything once again seemed somehow familiar. Everything was excellent, however, and it tasted delicious to me. Before breakfast, Asket brought a large container of cool, clear water from somewhere, which she carried out of the ship and placed on the ground not far away. Like little children, we then splashed around with the delicious water and cleaned ourselves with it. It was a very fun morning toilet.
Asket's explanations part _3.
Our technology has developed so far that, with it, even after centuries, we can still entirely and faithfully reproduce the reality of once obtained impressions and spoken words, and so forth, in every detail and word. With all of it, it is only important that I listen to every spoken word, and can also register your thoughts, feelings, and perceptions, whereby it is all stored in my subconscious. Therefore, tomorrow, when we undertake the trips into the past, and partly also into the future, it will be important that I am always near to you, so I can register everything in my subconscious. A further important factor is that in the various epochs and in the most varied lands of the past and future, the most varied languages also predominate, of which you naturally have no command, because in this life you have never learnt them. But this signifies no difficulties for you now, because we have small technical devices at our disposal which transform any language or other kind of communicative sound into a desired form. Accordingly, we call them transformers or translators. They are very small in size and can be fastened to the belt. I will give you one such device, whereby you can understand any language as desired, and in this way, also your language will be understandable to any others.
Asket's explanations part _4.
I am neither an angel, nor do I come on a mission from God. These stories about us are deliberate misdirections by evil elements who want to conjure up malevolent things in a religious form. Here, Edward, take this device and fasten it onto your belt.
What is that?
A language converter.
Asket's explanations part _5.
This continent, America, was also inhabited by humans of extraterrestrial origin, from spacefarers and their descendants, around 2,500,000 years ago, by your time reckoning. But, as usual on this world, they got in each other's hair and annihilated themselves. They invented atom bombs and exploded them in a blitzkrieg. Even today, after many, many millennia, you still name many regions of this continent the same as they were named in much earlier times. These designations were handed down up to the current time, if also often in strongly altered form. But they still exist as testimony to that unreasonable and barbaric time. Those who wish to see hard evidence can find it at any time, and view it, and think about it. There are sites of former cities which stood there many, many thousands of years ago, and have been melted by atomic hells into glass-like masses. The best preserved testimonies have become curiosities in your time, because the Earth human does not know their genesis. But very well known in this regard are names like Death Valley, which, however, also still has a relationship to other events in the present day. The Valley of Fire near the city of Las Vegas is another witness to the past and the timeless atomic insanity of humans who populated the Earth again and again.
Asket's explanations part _6.
It is all right. But now, look at these articles of clothing from my homeland. You should put these on now and cover them with these cloaks. I recently brought these 6 cloaks with me out of the year 32, in the foreknowledge that I would need them.
In the floor length, silvery white, shimmering and richly pleated, billowing dresses. We looked like angels, almost exactly as they were portrayed in the religious picture books, which I had leafed through at various times. From somewhere, Asket had acquired an entire little sack of ancient coins which she made shiny again with some sort of radiation.
Contact Report 001.
On the other hand, however, many dare to associate us with the human religion, with which we have nothing to do and also never want anything to do. The Earth human calls us extraterrestrials or star people or whatever he or she likes. He or she imputes supernaturality to us and does not know us in the least. In reality, we are human beings just like the Earth humans, except that our knowledge and our essence of wisdom are far superior to theirs, so also from a technological point of view. Other solar systems, however, harbor a variety of lives, not just human ones. The forms of life are diverse, human as well as animal. Also, many animal or even plant life forms have developed to highly advanced level of life. So there are species who have attained great knowledge and have freed themselves from their spheres of life, who travel outer space and also come to your Earth every now and then. Many of them, however, are unpleasant contemporaries and live in a certain barbarism, which is often almost as bad as that of the Earth human. One must watch out for them because they often combat and destroy everything that gets in their way. Already often, they have destroyed entire planets or forced their inhabitants into barbaric slavery. This is one of our tasks, to warn the Earth human about these creatures. Let the human beings know this, because more and more the time approaches when a clash with these degenerate human creatures becomes unavoidable. Another task is aimed at the sects and religions and the underdevelopment of human consciousness associated with these. But as already mentioned, beamship deceivers and charlatans are also heading in the same direction. Quite clearly, they put out the lie to the world that we or our brothers and sisters from other parts of the outer space would come here by order of God, by which they mean the creation, as angels or the like, in order to bring the Earth humans the long-desired peace and the truth of religion and the protection and commands of God. This is nothing more than a well-thought-out lie of sectarians and deceivers or charlatans. Because we have never acted by such orders, and we will also never do so. Bring this truth to the light of the world and make it known to the human beings. This is another part of our task. If this doesn't happen, then humankind will slowly destroy itself and fall into complete darkness of consciousness.
Contact Report 002.
But I do not want to praise or flatter you, as we too have long gone beyond those things. It is not the manner or the desire of us simply to penetrate into the thoughts of others, when this is really not important. Moreover, we all have no right to penetrate into the personal secrets of others. If one penetrates into the thoughts of others, then there is always the danger that one will learn more from it than was originally intended.
What about so-called UFO contactees claiming that their friends from the stars would only communicate telepathically between themselves?
Certainly, there are such creatures who only communicate telepathically. However, their communication was telepathic from the very beginning, or else they quite simply let their spoken language wither away. To our knowledge, however, Earth's space has never been approached by beings whose means of communication were purely telepathic. All the wannabe contactees allude to our being on a mission for God and the Christian religion, a malicious lie that is devoid of any truth. Already often, beings from foreign races have come to your Earth and have undertaken their expeditions here. They collected various things that could be of service to their investigations. And it will also happen again and again that such beings will come here and pursue their studies. They come from the most diverse worlds and systems. They are often still new in the field of travel in outer space, and, therefore, carry out expeditions to expand their knowledge and cognizance. Thereby, it can happen that they unintentionally come into contact with the Earth humans, only to, in such a case, never come back again. They do not crave power and the like, as they are glad that they finally have serenity and order in their own worlds. With them, it can also happen that every now and then they take some Earth humans, bring them into their beam ships, and examine them very closely with their apparatuses, and determine their anatomy most exactly. However, they let these human beings go again without exception, as they do not want to harm them. They are often more humane beings than the Earth human. But unfortunately, rather barbaric beings also travel outer space and come to Earth every now and then. Many among them are power-hungry and evil. With them, it can happen that they kidnap and abduct Earth humans, also other planetary human beings of other systems, and bring them to their home planets. There, these poor creatures then lead lives as exhibition and experiment objects. The Earth human and all other inhabitants of other worlds must beware of these creatures, for in their maliciousness, they often use the worst form of Gewalt. Feelings and other human traits and impulsations are often foreign to them, so a life means nothing of value to them.
Contact Report 003.
Since our last meeting, I have occupied myself intensively and much with the so-called UFO literature. In doing so, I came across the suggestion that you human beings from the stars, if I may put it that way, are always described as supernatural, beautiful, and as protectors of humanity on Earth, almost as all-knowing and as teachers, etc., and that you should therefore live practically in spiritual and conscious perfection. But my intellect and my impression convey something completely different to me in this respect, and I cannot get over the fact that all this can only be lies. Lies that probably originate from sick brains, or from brains that are not free and brand fantasy pictures as reality, because the originators of thoughts cannot cope with real reality, and therefore escape into a fantastic pseudo-world. The reality seems to be too hard for them, so they flee into fantasies, because they hope for help in these.
If deceivers label and describe us as you said just now, it is nothing more than an infamous lie, originating from the brains of consciously poor human beings who imagine a better life in their fantasy. And because they themselves cannot achieve it, at least not yet in this life, they simply attribute it to us and make us out to be something perfect. But we, too, are still far away from this stage and must continually develop ourselves further. We are not the so-called above-human or superhuman beings, as the Earth humans like to call us in their unknowledge and in their imaginations. We are also no teachers, missionaries, or pioneers. We only have the dutiful task of preserving the developing, as well as already existing human life throughout the cosmic space. This means that we strive to keep order and watch over certain life. Here and there, we approach the inhabitants of different worlds. If our directives allow us to do so, choose individuals from among them and provide them with explanations. This, however, only then when a race develops higher and slowly becomes thinking. We then slowly prepare them for the need to become familiar with the thought of not being the only thinking beings in the universe. Here and there, we also help on a telepathic basis to let certain cognitions germinate and to make technical inventions which are necessary at that time.
Why then do you not appear en masse and show yourselves to the general public? And why don't you get in touch with the most diverse governments?
Without exception, all governments on Earth are staffed by human beings who have the characteristic of addiction to might and profit. Under the guise of peace and friendship, they would only want to seize our beam ships to be able to exercise absolute Gewalt rule over the Earth with them. But they would also try to conquer the outer space because they know no bounds. However, they are not even able to, on the Earth, create peace and friendship between the countries, not even among the human beings in their own country. How, then, should they be able to have such means of might at their disposal, such as are our beam ships and their multifaceted facilities represent it? There is no interest in showing ourselves to the general public. Their consciousness is still short and small and confined in religious enslavement. On the one hand, the Earth humans would worship us as gods in their short reflection, as they did already in earlier times. And on the other hand, there would be many among them who, as criminals and greedy for might ones, would seize our beam ships. But there are also those who are not to be forgotten, and there are countless millions of them who would fall into complete hysteria and fall ill in consciousness. For these reasons, it is advisable for the time being to maintain contact only with individual Earth humans and, to via them, slowly let the knowledge of our existence and tasks become known, and to prepare them for what is to come. We are no wardens or guardians of the Earth humans. We only feel obliged to them because our originators were their ancestors, before they fled from the Earth as a result of self-inflicted catastrophes of some might-greedy ones and escaped to the Pleiades.
But I would still be interested in one thing, Sim Yase. It has often been written that the human beings from the stars would become very old, millions of years even. What's up with that?
Do you believe these claims?
No, because it sounds too unlikely. I can only believe it when I look at it in the way that a human being of about 70,000 million years of age is no longer a human being, but some kind of spiritual embodiment.
You are right about that, too. A human being is capable of living for several hundred or even thousands of years when it has attained a certain spiritual and consciousness-based relative state of perfection and a correspondingly high and healthy mode of life.
You are surely aware that our dear little women on Earth keep their age a secret, and that they smear their lips, face, finger, and toenails with powder and colors. What do you think about that?
Personally, I find makeup disgusting, but also all forms of painting the body as well as fingernails and toenails.
I think so too. But how is it with all of you? Do you also live in this delusion?
Definitely not. You do not know, however, that the average lifetime with us is very high and amounts to several hundreds of years. That is, about 1,000 years. So I am still very young and only 330 years old, which corresponds approximately to your 33 years by your understanding.
Contact report 004.
Just like the Earth human, we also have to learn a language. Except that this is much easier for us and causes us less effort. We are in possession of all Earth languages that are presently spoken or were ever spoken at an earlier time. This means that we have accurate records of them in the most diverse forms. Language training courses, as you would call them, were compiled from them. This work is done by linguists and machines, similar to those you call computers. Then other machines of a similar kind serve to transmit and enter the language into us. This means that we get connected to such a machine or apparatus, through which we then receive the desired language transmission. This occurs through a hypnosis-like state induced by the machine. As a result, the language terms and senses are implanted and registered. This process takes 21 days. After that, we need another 9 to 10 days in order to speak the language correctly. This means that we then have to practice speaking and pronouncing in the right way with the help of the apparatuses and the linguists. To learn a language, we need 30 to 31 days in this manner. We have a different language than the Earth humans. Even then, however, there is still the great danger that the barbaric Earth human will use her or his technical knowledge and ability, and his technical achievements maliciously and might greedily to satisfy his desires for might. This has happened and continues to happen time and again with other beings of other worlds, not only with the Earth human. In the outer space itself, dangers of various sizes lurk, and also other inhabitants of worlds are not simply left helpless in the face of an attack of another race. There could follow deadly defeats and complete enslavement for the Earth human, which would be equivalent to a falling back into primeval times. But it could also be that the planet Earth becomes completely destroyed, because the technical prerequisites for this are already created in the outer space, with very many humane and inhumane races up to the last relative perfection. If the Earth human wants to carry his barbaric imperiousness and greed for might out into the outer space, then she or he must reckon with her or his complete destruction, and no other planetary beings will rush to help her or him. But the Earth human being must also prepare to defend himself, against malicious intruders, which she or he can only accomplish, however, through a complete unification of all the peoples of your planet. The dangers from the outer space are great and are lurking in all corners of the galaxies. Mostly, these are inhumane, might-greedy beings who know no feelings, or only inferior ones, or those very badly out of the control of the good human nature. Others, however, know how to defend themselves, and they inevitably always do this radically. Other world races do not let themselves be senselessly warred or driven into exile, servitude, and exploitation, as is customary among the peoples of the earth. They will defend themselves by gavolt, and still, for a long time, they will be vastly superior to all the technological possibilities of the Earth humans. Where this is not the case, however, they are often under the protection of further and higher developed intelligences, whose techniques reach the final relative perfection. The Earth human must become familiar with the thought that her or his ancestors had brought the whole humankind and the Earth itself to the brink of ruin, and had to partially evacuate the planet in a wild escape. But it should also serve her/him as a warning that greed for might and barbarism are deadly attributes. That this is the case has also been experienced by a second race in your solar system, In their boundless hatred and in their uncontrollable greed for might, they destroyed themselves right down to the last, and hardly any being survived the fight. They annihilated and destroyed their own planet in a tremendous explosion, and nothing remained of it but many thousands of asteroids that still orbit your sun today, as a memorial to the deadly irrationality of human beings. Remnants of the once splendidly blooming planet Malona, which its inhabitants destroyed in their barbaric greed for might and irrationality.
Contact Report 005, a note. The following excerpts explain how some ancient Pleiadian ancestors found their way to Earth. See also Contact Report 9:120-170, Contact Report 70, S23 to 181, and Contact Report 121, B79 to 90.
Only the knowledge and ability of our ancestors, who had settled on the earth and had begotten their descendants here, prevented the terrible end. Deep in the unknown space, in a space-time shifted solar system of the Milky Way, a solitary star floated far away from the normal orbits of the satellites orbiting the Sun. After the thousands of years, it, the destroyer comet, then rushed suddenly and unexpectedly into the closest sphere of influence of the Sun and its planets. Now already illuminated by the reflecting rays of the Sun, it approached the orbit of the outermost planet at tremendous speed. Still only a few hundred units away from the next worlds, it evoked hellish storms in these, which destroyed large areas that had been cultivated by the human beings peacefully emerging there. With trembling for their arduously gained goods and their already hard lives, they suddenly found themselves exposed to the immense and uncompassionate forces of the universe. Helpless, doomed to be handed over from life to death, they stared out into the sky, to the gigantic wandering planet which raced towards them as a cosmic mortal projectile. On the night of the third day after the incursion of the destroyer into the planetary pathways, the middle of the night may just have passed. The drifter from outer space entered the elliptical orbit of the sixth planet. Full of horror and consternation over the immense forces of nature, the human beings fled into the vast plains that covered the planet in great numbers. 2/3 of the humankind that inhabited the planet was killed and destroyed in the unleashed hell of nature. Forced by cosmic determinations, the survivors had to find a new beginning, devoid of any culture, set back to a primordial time of the development. The humankind of the distant solar system, 2/3 of which were destroyed at that time, found a new beginning which was hard and full of privation. Nevertheless, in less than 9 centuries, the human beings built up a new civilization and culture, created and driven out of the hardship arising from cosmic forces. The people succeeded in preventing further cosmic catastrophes and annihilations. Through arduous research, work, and voluntary commitment to the very last one, they created plans for their new culture and for a far-reaching technology. Dwellings were built that could withstand the G-vault of nature, and generation after generation brought together their knowledge and skills. Their spirit and their consciousness and their knowledge refined themselves rapidly, and soon the succeeding generations had reached a technology which, without any imagination, defied all possibilities. And there came the time when the descendants flew out into the unending expanses of the universe in round, plate-like flying ships with beam drives. Other solar systems and planets were flown to and expeditioned. New worlds and possibilities opened up in order to transplant the peoples of the home planet, which had meanwhile become too small for the new humankind. The scientists with their spacecrafts and abundantly provided means of all kinds and fantastic application possibilities used the dimension gate known to them. to another space-time configuration of the Dern universe, reached the Milky Way area and explored the space for ever newer things. They found many new habitable worlds and solar systems, which they often made subservient to themselves using their beam weapons in short one-sided fights, in order to conquer them for the settlement of their race. However, apart from their horrendous material and gene-based technology, they also perfected their consciousness and their spirit, so that nothing which they wanted to experience remained foreign to them anymore. The use of their powers of consciousness became implicitness to them, and so they gradually raised themselves to rulers vis-a-vis their peoples. They called themselves kings of wisdom with the word Ishwish, which is on the earth translated as God. Far superior spiritually, and in terms of knowledge as well as consciousness to the normal people, they soon dominated it in evil dictatorial form. Yet after centuries, having grown tired of the godlike scientists, the people rose against them initially in silent revolution. Oppressed, however, by the spiritual and consciousness-based powers, and by the tremendous knowledge of the gods, the people had to submit to their rulers. But the will for freedom made them secretly prepare for the fight. It glowed like a smoldering ember for 4 centuries, to flare up in the given moment as untamable, wild conflagration. According to the earthly calculation of time, it was about 230,000 years ago when the Liberation War broke out. Evil fightings covered many planets, and much was destroyed. A scientist named Asael used the opportunity to make himself self-reliant and flee. Secretly, he managed to bring a large fleet of spaceships into his possession, to man them, and to flee under heavy acts of fighting. With 183 wide bodies and almost 250 reconnaissance ships, with a total of 360,000 human beings on board, he fled from his home system. For years, they were restlessly roaming through the expanses of the space, before one day they found a solar system that offered them opportunities to live, far away from their home system. It took 300 years after they seized the planet, because they created a new humankind. Afterwards, they settled on 2 more planets of their new home system, to then again traverse the outer space while exploring. In doing so, they came across the system of the earthly sun. They settled here on 3 different planets, namely on the Earth, on Malona, and on Mars, and began with the building of a new culture. But the planets were still rather inhospitable and often hostile. So they left the planets again and paid them visits only now and then. When, then, on the second planet, the Earth, first intelligent life started moving, they came back and lived there. But in accordance with the human beings reflecting, power struggles broke out again, and they left the Earth. From the new home planet, however, the development of the Earth was constantly monitored and expeditioned year after year. From time to time, it was tried again and again to settle the planet. Also, beings were deported to the Earth, and these were simply left to their fate without any technology and help. They became stunted, wild, and bestial. Then finally the time came, when the major step was finally ventured. A certain culture was built up on the Earth, which lasted for several millennia. But again, greed for power broke out, and everything was destroyed. So the Earth fell again into its old existence. Then it took again several millennia before a new attempt was made. This time, however, no more in the sense of an actual expedition. On the home planet, once again, differences of opinion arose, because the scientists again elevated themselves to gods and subjugated the peoples to servitude. From this, it resulted that a group of scientists and other human beings who thought differently banded together and seized various spaceships. almost 70,000 human beings fled and settled on the Earth. Their highest leader, Pelagon, was freely recognized by all as Ishwish god and led a tight regiment. He had nearly 200 sub-leaders, each of whom was responsible for a special field of knowledge. They were, so to speak, sub-gods, or also called guardians. On the home planets, however, war broke out, and much was destroyed again. But the human beings finally achieved the freedom and the peace. That has remained so ever since, and will also never change again. According to the earthly time calculation, that was around 50,000 years ago. Note: see also Contact Report 711:47-106. Only on the Earth itself things were not always so peaceful, and many mistakes were made. And by one of these mistakes, the primal human races of the Earth were procreated, whose descendants still live today and are about to commit the same mistakes as did our ancestors.
Contact Report 006.
I also like to laugh.